Hey,
Can you hear me?
can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
How are you, sir?
So is this
Oh, it's extremely.
about a strike?
The airstrike is terrible news, but I can barely hear a word you're saying, David. The internet is so broken up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, now you're good. Yeah, the Syrian airstrike, absolutely horrible. Yeah, and you're really breaking up. The internet is really cutting out on your end.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's jammed to capacity. If
That must
there's,
must
have you
be.
seen any actual news?
I saw Donald Trump's speech where, he just is towing the line, saying that they're bombing the gas sites, or, there's chemical sites to take out Bashar Assad, the dictator's ability to use gas. And I would have really preferred a
Hmm.
Trump speech that says what you've been saying. There's actually no evidence to show that this was the dictator. And if Trump had come up there and said, we're not bombing because we realize that this is the work of evildoers trying to fool us, then I would have said, "There's the Trump we need." But I got to tell you, David, I think I've kind of lost hope in Trump now.
Yeah, and I think well, I've lost hope in perhaps in the generals around him. We've been briefing open source General Kelly
Right,
and the custodial chain for this chemical material that we've tracked back to, well, amongst others, Northwestern University.
right.
So under the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, that's a contract. Now, the situation is that there were two attacks related to chemical agents, one after the other. There was the one in Salisbury in Wiltshire,
Uh huh.
where allegedly it was a Novichok type agent,
Right.
but the Russians said we never called it that. We called it foliant. And the Americans said that all declared stocks had been destroyed.
Right.
Now, if you check the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, it's very suspect because it's infested with these senior executive service people.
Uh huh.
Right. If you go into the Defense Threat Reduction Agency as a member of the senior executive service, founded by Field McConnell's sister, that's why these clowns need to talk to Field McConnell, understand the mentality of the sister. She's a psychopath,
Right.
right? She founded the Senior Executive Service, which is a bunch of, I could call it, unhinged bureaucrats. That is to say, they're not attached in any way to the United States or loyalty to the Republic.
Right.
They're freewheeling agents that wheel in and wheel out. And very nicely, when they arrive at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, they get parking privileges. That is to say, they can park beside a general or a flag officer. But of great concern to the United States, I believe, should be when you set up a senior executive service member in an office, he to fly a senior executive service flag. My understanding is the United States Army refuses to salute this flag,
Oh.
but I am strongly of the belief that that ship that went out to process the 1,500 tons of Syrian chemical agents
Yeah.
was flying under an SES gold-fringed flag,
Wow.
which may suggest to people who know about constitutional law better than I do that degrading was done under Admiralty law, that the degrading or the destruction of the 1,500 tons of
Ah.
chemical agents by
Yes.
that was supervised members of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and I have reason to believe that the people who were there.
Okay, David, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. No, so are we recording now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll declare myself as David Hawkins, if I may,
Yes.
with Abel Danger, where Abel Danger describes itself as a cloud-centric crime scene investigation operation around the world. We've been interviewed on multiple shows, including yours, Jason, for which as many thanks, because we require every communications channel we can to get the message out. And in particular, we've been warning General Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff. I think the warnings, we've sent 250 warnings to him, sequentially numbered. And when I say to him, we put it up online in the belief that someone, presumably in the network around Donald Trump, is looking at the kind of information that we've been able to gather that relates particularly to the probable source of the chemicals that were used to attack the Sergei Skripal in Salisbury in Wiltshire.
Right.
And the chemical attacks in Syria. And this isn't peculiarly Russian technology. This is technology that was developed by the United States and the United Kingdom and Russia during and after the Cold War. And these stocks, many of them running into thousands of tons, theoretically were the subject of major destruction or degradation efforts. Mm-hmm. In the particular case of the United States, the agency that has been set up to oversee that is an agency called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And it's been handing out contracts to a number of organizations, including Northwestern University in Chicago, for a detoxification process for which a patent was granted to Northwestern University. And if you look at that patent, it actually describes what range of chemical agents it was intended to destroy. And it's my belief, I think you would agree with me, Jason, that you don't know that this destruction system is any good unless you have samples of the agents to be destroyed.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's described as Northwestern University's metal organic frameworks for the catalytic detoxification of chemical warfare nerve agents.
Interesting. Right.
And that technology was developed, presumably with finance and guidance, and sample nerve agents or chemical agents to be destroyed and tested with this device.
Right.
By the Defense Threat Reduction Agency,
mm-hmm.
which I believe has been infiltrated by organized crime.
Huh. What makes you believe that?
Because if you Google Senior Executive Service and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, you'll find that they lay out a welcome mat for members of the Senior Executive Service, which was founded by Field McConnell's sister, Christine Marcy, in 1978 or 79. Now, people might legitimately ask why this woman, who is a charter member of the Senior Executive Service, is likely to be connected to organized crime. Well, in 1994, she launched the United States Department of Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System, nicknamed Conair. So from 1994 to the present, I was talking with Phil McConnell the other day, and loosely we would estimate that she has moved, not she, but the airline that was specially created with funds through the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which she founded, probably moved 1 million prisoners. Now, in the film Conair, they say these are the lowest of the low. Well, that's a bit of poetic license for a film, maybe.
What's the actual name of Conair, David, the alternate name?
The United States Department of Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System. JPATS, it's known as.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
Now, effectively, this airline, if Christine Marcy and her colleagues in the Senior Executive Service were so minded, they could deploy, and they used to do this in World War II, they could go into a jail and put together a little SWAT team, Special Weapons and Tactics team, which speaks the language of the target company, right, behind enemy lines in Germany or Russia, and fly them to the crime scene before the crime occurs, and do a hit, and fly them back again. Put them back in jail with a perfect alibi.
Right. Right. They were in jail. How could they have done that? Right.
Exactly. So Christine Marcy, just as an illustration of the kind of people she handled, she put Ramzi Youssef, Timothy McVeigh, and Ted Kaczynski behind bars at ADX Florence. They had adjacent cells. That's a pretty dangerous team, right?
Yeah. How do you spell Ramzi Youssef?
Yusef. Youssef.
Yeah.
He allegedly built the bomb for the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center,
Yeah.
and he said, "Give me more money, and I'll bring it down. I'll bring them down next time," because the plan was to bring them both down by pulling one into the other.
Right. I remember the day that happened.
You do?
Oh yeah, I was crossing Fifth Avenue. I was looking right at the World Trade Center. You'd be able to see a beautiful view of it down Fifth Avenue, but
well, included in the munition, I can't remember the entire details, but there was 100 pounds of atomized aluminum powder, which gives it the flavor of a rocket propellant, a solid rocket propellant, which is ultra hot. It's actually 5,600 degrees Fahrenheit, twice the melting point of steel. So it actually vaporizes or turns the steel into a plasma, right? But he didn't have enough of it. His designs weren't as sophisticated, but I'm very confident that the design of the bomb of 1993 and the more effective ones of 2001 were by the explosive experts in the United Kingdom, Porton-Down.
So, David, I'm looking at this document all about SES, and you and Field believe that anything having to do with SES is just purely terrible, right?
I would use the word terror and terrible. You know, they're a little emotional. I would say that the senior executive service is hell-bent on an insurrection to overthrow the government of the United States.
Uh-huh. And anyone supporting it is for that.
Well, I don't know. You see, historically, when I've studied in management at university and so on, I remember being told that there are three ideologies that you have to deal with as a manager in industry, and one is more dangerous than the other two. And the professor, whoever he was, I can't remember the name, it's a long time ago, he said you have capitalism, communism, and bureaucracy.
Right.
And the art of being a bureaucrat is to be totally invisible. So very few people know any powerful bureaucrats. But I can assure you they're exceedingly powerful because they're buried, right? It was bureaucrats that sent the Jews into the gas chambers. You know, they had a quota to meet. To be brutally frank, as far as they were concerned, nothing personal.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
they're given an assignment and they're just doing their job according to them.
It's a process.
Right.
Right? So you embed 8,000 to 9,000 bureaucrats with the senior executive service in every major government department, and you've basically got the first ingredient of a successful insurrection. That is to say, you just need a series of events that either decapitates the legislature, or the elected representatives of the people, or the elected representatives people believe they could be decapitated, and you'll get a surrender by the elected representatives of the people.
I believe we saw that tonight.
Well, I don't know about tonight, but on 9/11 you certainly saw it.
This Syrian missile strike, I mean, it's Donald Trump succumbing to the deep state, isn't it?
Well, again, let's not use the deep state. We can be far more precise. Let's call it the senior executive service. 9,000 bureaucrats. And let me go back to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So there was a ship sent out to Syria to process and destroy its chemical weapon stocks, and it destroyed 1,500. And the Defense Threat and Reduction Agency people on that ship proudly announced that they had destroyed all Syria's declared weapon stocks.
Right. I did find an article on that, David. I found an article that said the name of the ship. This was interesting. It says the U.S. naval vessel on which neutralization will take place has not been officially named, but is believed to be the MV Cape Ray.
That's right, it is. And there's a subsequent announcement that they actually destroyed 1,500 tons.
This article's from 2013.
Okay, well, subsequently they announced that they had destroyed 1,500 tons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when a senior executive service shows up at the Defense Threat Reduction stage, they put out a welcome map. Now, these are bureaucrats, and also working at the DTRA are flag officers and generals. Mm-hmm. So in the car park, if you are a member of the senior executive service, you are given the privilege of being able to park beside a general. So actually, in civilian terms, they treat you as though you were a general.
Wow.
Now, in the military, there are not too many generals around, but you imagine having 9,000 bureaucrats who see themselves as having the status of a general, except they're unelected and unfireable.
Why did
Now, people
Robin
have asked-
Gritz think it was just a pay grade? She was in the FBI. Have you heard any of the interviews with her?
Yeah, and she's wrong. Right, and I don't know why she does or why she doesn't or why she chooses not to declare this stuff. This is a separate organization with its own rules and its own privileges. Now, the most important privilege, I believe, symbolically, is when a senior executive service member at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency goes into their office, they can fly the SES flag.
Yeah.
And it's a gold-fringed flag.
That's their loyalty is to that, not to the U.S.
Well, my understanding is, and I'm not an expert in constitutional law, there is a legal concept called admiralty law, so that when Britain ruled the waves, it would come into a port, right, and maybe someone hadn't paid their bills or whatever, so the local domestic law didn't cover off the particular complexity of the claim or the lien or the mortgage or whatever it was. So admiralty law was spread around or propagated by the British to run the empire on which the sun never sets, including the United States of America, or the colonies before they became a republic, right? So some people, I'm not an expert in that, say that the gold-fringed flag symbolizes admiralty law, which prevails on the high seas. So when that ship anchored wherever it did and took those 1,500 tons, it was done under the umbrella of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and I believe it was done by the members of the Senior Executive Service under the gold-fringed flag of Admiralty law.
I'm going to see if I can get an image of the MV Cape Ray. Here it is. Well,
You got it?
I do. I don't see a
You see,
U.S. flag on it.
I can't see your screen. You see, so I'm just
Yep.
I'm on the landline, but no matter. So now, if the founder member of the Senior Executive Service, Christine Marcy, Field McConnell's sister, and that's why Field is such a pivotal player in this, because whatever his strengths and weaknesses, we all have them. He has a deep personal knowledge of the psychology of his sister. I personally think she's a psychopath.
Right. We're meeting quite a few of those.
Yeah, but this one is rather unique because in 1984, she launched the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which she used to finance the planes for Conair. She also launched the database for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 1984 with Eric Holder. That's pretty powerful. You suddenly have the ability to raise a great deal of money by confiscating someone's Lamborghini that can't explain how they got it.
Right.
Right, and the hoods are very wary of suing the government to get the Lamborghini back because they've got to go into court and talk a lot about the source of the money.
Right.
So a really serious hood will let the government keep the Lamborghini and flog it. Right, and then the money goes to the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which Christine Marcy used to buy various planes or aircraft in around the 1994 period. So effectively, the woman had a private airline
That
flying
she
the
stole.
most dangerous people. Sorry?
She basically just stole it.
Well, I don't know. As a bureaucrat, she probably said, well, I'm in charge of the Asset Forfeiture Fund and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database, and the United States Marshal Service and the Prisoner Medical Services Program. And basically, I can fly who I want, where I want, put them in jail, spring them out of jail, fly them to New York on 911, put together a demolition team, blow up the Twin Towers at Ramzi Youssef. Remember, she's got Ramzi Youssef in jail.
Right.
So
Well, you
she
know, I
goes
wanted to
him.
tell you, David,
What?
the JPAT's webpage has a special link right on the home page that says that they're celebrating 30 years of owned aircraft operations. They make a point of telling you that they own it.
Yes, which is underneath the Department of Justice, of course. But the bureaucrats at the top of the Department of Justice are the senior executive service. So ownership is a dodgy issue, but the custodians of Con Air and its flights and who's flying and who isn't is the senior executive service. The custodians of the disposal process of the chemical agents off Syria would have been the senior executive service. So the senior executive said, well, we better have some of these stocks in the United States because we better develop an antidote or a detoxification process. And they go to the university, which hosted the career of one Bernardine Dawn, who's the leader of the Weather Underground terrorist organization.
Right.
Who attacked the Pentagon in 1972.
Yeah.
And she and Bill Ayers decided that they would need to kill 25 million Americans in order to secure their revolution. Well, if you're going to kill 25 million Americans, you better get your hands on some weapons of mass destruction, such as chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive weapons, that you can then use maybe for an anthrax attack on senators after 9/11, or special explosives that can be put in the elevator shaft with ultra-high temperature accelerants, and you basically turn the inside of the elevator shaft into rocket propellant reaction, which fires 10-ton girders out of the top of the tower. Now, I want to stay focused on this because I think this is a huge, extraordinarily dangerous, stupid act by Trump and his generals. Now, they're either unconsciously stupid or they have been deceived by probably the most brilliant propaganda experts the world has ever seen, and I regret to say I think that's the British. And now if you look at the British, what did they want at the time of Pearl Harbor? They want the Americans in the war.
Yeah.
The main communication system at that time to be hacked to create the impression that the Japanese weren't coming, standing down the American defenses at Pearl Harbor, was provided by Radio Corporation of America.
Serco.
Which was, you got it, in 1920s, when Radio Corporation of America was set up, it was described by David Sarnoff, the founder, as a radio patent monopoly company.
Yeah.
So what Radio Corporation of America knew, and its private backers, if you get hold of the patents of a country, you control the country.
Right. David, the
1920.
Sorry to interrupt, but the front page of the New York Times right now says the U.S. attacks Syria in a retaliatory strike to subliminally make people think that we're somehow, and they got George Washington in the photograph. Everything about this is designed to make you think they're doing the right thing.
It's pathetic. And you know what? I believe Serco, and let me just tell you how powerful Serco is. There was a Serco shareholder meeting on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11. I haven't been able to find the individuals who were sent as representatives, but it's very important to understand what were the major shareholders of Serco on that date. Well, there were three governments: the British government, the Saudi Arabia government, and the Singaporean government. There were 10 banks described as global I mean, most of them were banks, but there are 10 or 11 banks that are particularly interesting because they describe themselves as global custodians with $80 trillion of assets under management. Right? So basically, for example, 10 global custodians owns a majority stake in Boeing.
And Trump was kind of warring with Boeing. Remember when he was president-elect, he was talking about getting a better deal on Air Force One, and there was some sort of multi-billion-dollar deal going on.
Well, it's a phony war, right? Now, if we go back to the patents, Boeing has patents that allow you to skyjack or hijack a plane remotely and fly it into a building, right? But there are two other very important shareholders in Serco on the morning of 9/11 on the 47th floor that would have a motive to overthrow the government of the United States, I believe. And those are the two big pension funds, one in the United States, one in the United Kingdom. So TIAA, that's the Teachers Insurance Annuity Association in the United States, would be paying benefits to people who are faculty, right?
Uh-huh.
Including Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers.
Yeah, I saw Bernardine Dawn a minute ago on Wikipedia, and she looks quite vital for a woman of 76 or whatever she is.
Well, they're delighted because they've got their revolution.
But, I mean, they show pictures of her when she was, on the FBI Most Wanted, and now she just looks like she's having a grand old time, smiling. I mean, how do you go from FBI Most Wanted to, I guess did she go to jail? What happened to Bernie?
No, because there was a FBI, well, it was a contrived screw-up at the FBI. They didn't get a proper warrant to listen or tap her phone, so she was home free. But she's a killer and a psychopath.
Oh, my God.
She never went to jail.
Holy cow.
And then she got a gig working for Sidley Austin in Chicago, where she mentored the Obamas. She's a psychopath.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you don't prosecute these crimes to the bitter end.
Whew.
Right? Because you empower these people.
Right.
Okay? Well, she taught one of the seminars at Northwestern University is taught by Bernardine Dawn was Torture, Paradigms, and Practice. So she knows all about making people suffer and then having people watch them suffer. Like Saddam Hussein running people through a wood chipper or feeding nerve agents to little children. The woman is a psychopath.
There it is. Paradigms and Practice, torture, yeah.
Well, isn't that pretty odd?
I mean, how
what
can
the hell
they
is going
have
on
that
in
be?
your educational system?
This small seminar will explore ethical, practical, and political consequences of constitutional and international law prohibiting torture in the contemporary world. What? Oh, her faculty profile is not found.
Well, she groomed the Obamas, right? The Obamas lectured, Barack Obama lectured at, I think, the University of Chicago. So he would be a member of the Teachers' Pension Fund, right? The equivalent in the United Kingdom is the University Superannuation Scheme. And I don't know that it's definitive, but on the whole, most of the faculties in universities and colleges around the world are left-wing Marxists. Very few of them are interested in business or capitalism or entrepreneurialism. Now, you can see by what these patents that are being granted in Northwestern University is the Defense Threat Reduction Agency is using the universities, I believe, to develop weapons of mass destruction and the antidotes. So they have the custody. Right? So what's happened, I believe, is that there is a supply chain operated by Serco, this British company. It calls itself a third-party logistics provider. It is running the United States Patent Office. It's running the United States Defense Ammunition Center. It's running the National Visa Center. It runs your bloody government.
It's weird.
Problem is, it's British.
Yeah.
And its investment advisor is N.M. Rothschild and Son.
Right.
And Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, worked for 25 years. So, we could go on and on, but essentially, Jason, what I've said in multiple emails and conversations, and I think that that's what perhaps we can champion, but I'll answer any questions you have, is America needs right now to strip Serco, Conair, and the Senior Executive Service out of any contract with the United States Republic, because these people represent an existential threat to your republic.
Yeah. I'm looking at a document here from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and it's the U.S. Department of Commerce Privacy Impact Assessment, USPTO Serco Patent Processing System. I mean, it's right in there.
Yep. And in 1802, the first superintendent of the Patent Office was a Dr. William Thornton, who designed or is the architect for the Capitol building. And he was an Anglo-American, after the War of Independence. But he evidently had ethical problems because someone approached him to patent a rifle, and Thornton said, well, it's already been patented. It hadn't, but there were elements of what was novel. So he turned the guy down, and then Thornton said, but however, if you put my name on the patent application with yours, I'll grant you a patent. So I'd say he was ethically challenged, but this is back in 1802, right? I don't think the British ever relinquished control over the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And if they control your patent office, they control you.
It's amazing, David. I'd never heard anybody talk about patents before I started listening to you and Field on Abel Danger, and it's just crazy. And then you look this stuff up, it's all right there.
Exactly. And, I think one of the things I want to be discussing with you in Abel Danger is when I believe we want to be making films, community-based, crowd-funded films, where we'd use your technical expertise, perhaps, in the area where the crime was committed, right? And I love the idea, you and I have discussed it, of the idea of demonstrating that the dagger that was found in the vicinity of the Valerie Percy crime could not have been used as a weapon because there were multiple triangular indents into a skull. In fact, her skull was fractured. And the haft of a dagger is not heavy enough to do a skull fracture. However, as we've discussed, the tripod, the Bell and Howell tripod, that was invented, I think, it was in 1929 or whatever. It's got a heavy triangular boss at the top, and then dagger ends to go into the ground, presumably secure a nice steady support for a camera. Now, if you slide the dagger teeth into the legs, you've got a wonderful weapon to go into the Valerie Percy's bedroom, beat her and stab her to death. The stepmother wakes up and goes in to see the stepdaughter. The sheets are covered with blood. There's a guy who shines a light into her eyes, and she's dazzled, but he runs away. And you and I have both seen a picture of the suspect, the police sketch of the suspect, and Peter G. Peterson, who's just died. And they're, in English, I don't know if you have that phrase in American, they're dead ringers. Peter G. Peterson beat Valerie Percy to death.
I forget where we got that police sketch of Peter G. Peterson.
But if you just Google suspect Valerie Percy, right, it'll come up. It's a guy with glasses, a very definite hairline, odd-looking ears. You got it?
Yep.
Right, now Google Peter G. Peterson and look for the picture that's about the right age. And you tell me, you're an expert in the visual arts, right?
Yeah, no, I remember we looked at this once before, and it was quite interesting. But, again, we're looking at a police sketch, and, it looks like whoever did this sketch was in 3rd grade or something. It's sort of a really bad sketch.
Well, I guess it was contemporary in 1966, and I don't know if things have improved, but
I'm not
I guess
sure
nowadays,
we're looking at the right one, though, David. You'll have to tell me. Police.
Well, it's Valerie Percy, suspect.
Of cat burglar, this says. Yeah, I put in Valerie Percy suspect. Suspect Valerie Percy. Let's see if it makes a difference. But it's the first image that comes up. Was it ever published in a newspaper or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm sure it was published everywhere, you see, but no one, I believe, until Abel Danger came along, would have developed this line of reasoning where you look at the crime scene to see if there's a signature of the use of a patented device in a way that wasn't intended by the patentee, the assignee, or the inventor. So I could quite legitimately file a patent if I was working for Bell and Howell for a tripod and get the patent granted. And then if the Crown of England or the equivalent parties that are still in existence in the United States decides they want to use that tripod to kill someone, they pay the patent owner, which is Bell and Howell, let's say $100,000 or $50,000, I don't know. And you see, because I think the film that could be made would allege, and I can't prove it yet, but I think the public in the vicinity of the climb would have a lot of fun trying to look through the probability of this. I think when Valerie Percy, she died at 21 years old in 1966, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 3 years earlier, she was 18.
Right.
Probably very well informed. And her father was stopped being the chairman of Bell and Howell.
Huh.
Right? So there's a Bell and Howell camera provided to Abraham Zapruder to record, in my opinion, a snuff film.
Right.
Because if you're paying a hit team, you want them to come back with evidence that they did the hit,
right,
not someone else, right? So the hit team is taught, or one component of the hit team is taught or equipped with a camera that can record what is known as the money shot. In the case of JFK, the money shot would have been the shot from in front, which blew the back of his head off.
So you think Zapruder was an agent of some kind?
Witting or unwitting, it's immaterial. He may have been told, we want a film of the... Now, his secretary, as I understand it, he went to see Kennedy, but his secretary said, or he asked her, I want to go and get the camera because I want to record this. Now, it may be the secretary or it may be Zapruder himself, but maybe the secretary was told, you've got to get a shot of JFK. So she goes back to the office, picks up this camera, right, and gives it to Zapruder.
Yeah.
And you and I have discussed that, the idea of symbolic logic, if the shot that killed Kennedy blew the back of his head off, and it wasn't coming from behind.
I agree.
Basic physics. So nothing else matters. That is to say, we haven't had to talk about Lee Harvey Oswald or any other conspiracy. You start by doing, the Sherlock Holmes stuff, exclude the impossible.
It's interesting. They're still putting Zapruder out there. This is an article from 2016, 5 Fast Facts about Abraham Zapruder. To what length? I mean, even if he's not an agent, they're still pushing this part of the story. And David...
Well, they have to, you see, because the films that I would like to make community-based and crowd-funded, that is to say, simultaneously, 50 around the world crime scenes that might go back to Christopher Marlowe in 1593 in Deptford, right? What we would teach people to do is, first of all, how to reason through a crime scene to exclude the impossible. Because people just are not equipped for that. That is to say, we sit with our mouths agape watching planes flying into the buildings, and a half an hour later, we see these buildings collapsing in their own footprints with 10-ton girders flying out the top and embedding themselves 100 meters away. Well, Jason, that's not gravity.
No, I know. I've seen that footage. There's no doubt. David, have you ever evaluated the first few frames of the Zapruder film where the crowd is virtually stationary? It's very odd.
No, that would be for people like you, because you have that background. And I'm sure you can, even back then with the technology, you can superimpose, you can add something. But I think it's unequivocal. Basically, at the end of one of these films, what I visualize is that you end the film having excluded the impossible. Therefore, right. Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot the fatal shot that killed Kennedy and blew the back of his head off. Right? The next film, which would be like a dipole, would be for the community that did the first film to do the film that best explains. Now, I've seen your stuff, a bit of it with Spider-Man, and it looks to me like you're an expert in virtual reality.
Well, I should tell you that my role on the film Spider-Man was extremely small. I was the second unit stereographer, and I controlled 3D settings on the camera for visual effects and stunts. So you can't really see my hand in the work there. And I did develop a virtual reality camera, but the virtual reality market never really took off the way they wanted, so I haven't done all that much with that. I did virtual reality work many, many years ago, but I was speaking with Francis Richard Connolly, and he wanted to do a recreation of the Zapruder film, and I told him that I felt it would be extremely expensive and complicated to do in any way that would be remotely properly. But we can certainly do a lot of creative things. What was it that you had in mind for virtual reality?
Well, I'm an expert in virtual reality, I guess, because when I was coordinator of artificial intelligence and geoscience in Schlumberger in the 1980s, I invented a system which could mimic the way human beings assemble models in their minds of, like, for example, the JFK assassination. That is to say, I can imagine what happened. Probably you can. We all have varying degrees of ability to imagine a scene. But what the lay people do who don't have a lot of experience, they could imagine almost anything, and they would violate the laws of physics. Like the bullet would have to be a magic bullet, and so on. So what I developed with the deductive computing machine for Schlumberger, and it was runner-up for the British Computer Society Gold Medal Award, is a software process that simulates reality, but the simulation is constrained by the laws of physics. Conservation of energy, matter, space, and time. I don't want to lose you, but the idea then is you overlay the simulation up on the screen with data from the real world and see if you can get a fit. If you get a perfect fit, or even if you got a close enough fit, a description of the simulation looks like an interpretation or a diagnostic of the real world. Well, that's what experts do, right? They'll look at an X-ray of a patient and say, oh, he's got a tumor behind the left ventricle or whatever, and you just see, the layperson would just see black and white or gray shadows, right?
David, I'm looking at this patent. Where do I read it? What do I click on here? Just this number?
Which patent are we talking about?
I'm on the Google Patents page for the deductive computing machine.
Okay, deductive computing machine, David Charles Hawkins, and you can, or you take that whole thing and put it in the address bar at the top, and somewhere you can actually open up that patent and look at it.
It's strange. I see it. I see the link to it and your name and everything, but then it just says, like, EP application, find prior art.
Are there any active links there?
Oh, wait, maybe this is it. Yes, I found it. Here we go. Drawings and stuff.
Well, it's a bit technical. Let me just move you on to another patent that I think would be interesting. And this is Kinetic, North America. Kinetic was spun out of the Porton Down Biological and Chemical Weapons Research Center in the United Kingdom in 2001, before 9/11, right?
Yeah.
And they have a patent, and I think we've discussed it before, but I'll read it. It's Kinetic North America Incorporated, Social Engineering Protection Appliance.
Right.
US 9123027B2. And we discussed that in the previous show, but essentially what they're looking for is malicious or criminal attacks on the internal emailing system of their clients. But you can see that's a dual-use system, because it could prevent the truth from coming out of an organization like the Defense Threat Reduction Agency.
So what does this mean, a social engineering attack? Is that like, what we're experiencing on YouTube, where people are striking?
Exactly. So they can deem you to be criminal or malicious.
Huh. Whoa.
And shut you down.
Well, that's exactly what George's brother is trying to do.
Exactly. So they're using Kinetic North America's Social Engineering Protection Appliance.
Huh.
And they're trawling around for people who are coming out with the truth.
Holy crap.
You got it.
I didn't tell you to say that, correct? Wow.
What, the holy or the crap part?
Yeah, no, I mean the whole story here. Yeah, I mean, so it's a patent.
So it comes back to the point, if you get hold of the patents, all of these patents can be used in different ways. They can be weaponized, right? So just like an uninterruptible autopilot might be developed by Boeing to prevent a hijacking,
Right.
But the technology doesn't care.
Right. It's the user.
It doesn't decide whether the guy in the cockpit is the enemy or the friend. But if you have, Marine Corps aviator pilot such as Chick Burlingham, who was known to Phil McConnell,
right.
He was the pilot of Flight 77. So he's in a plane, and a system like this deems him to be an enemy.
Huh.
So they cut out the communications and take over the plane, and they fly it out to a drop zone. They use the plane to conceal a drone, and the drone takes out the Pentagon's U.S. Navy Command Center. It was an attempted coup d'etat.
Yeah, so, of course, the technology doesn't care, it's the user.
Well, that's right, and you have... there were three technologies that were vital to the British war effort in World War II that appear to have been transferred into the offices of the alien property custodian in Chicago. And the man who did that, and some people say he was the fifth or the sixth spy, a Cambridge man, his name was Victor Rothschild.
Mm.
And he worked with N.M. Rothschild, and then after the war he worked with Shell, and he was a chemist. Mm-hmm. So he would have been the principal chemical weapons expert for Churchill.
Mm-hmm. Churchill's
and
toy
they would
shop.
have built stocks like VX gas. The British invented VX gas. Now what the British discovered was that the Americans intended to develop nuclear weapons without them. So they very quickly put together a bomb which they, I forget the name of the project, I think they exploded it off the west coast of Australia. And then ultimately there was a trade, so the British and the Americans traded nerve gas chemical agent weapons of mass destruction technology with the Americans' nuclear technology. So the two countries have actually developed the chemical weapons and the nuclear weapons in tandem, and either one can use it in the case of defending or pretending to attack the other.
Do you guys have the patent? Do you know what the patent is for the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot?
I think there's a series. Yeah, I think we got a number for it somewhere, but
it's a bunch of different things, right? Secure aircraft communications, addressing and reporting system.
Yeah. I think there's a Boeing, you might Google for that, a Boeing intervention flight management system, which dates from the 1980s.
I feel like I've seen it before. We've found it, intervention flight management system, yeah.
That's Boeing in the 1980s, the time when
86.
Phil McConnell's sister was asking him how to take care of a mutiny of prisoners on the Conair planes. So they had the technology back in the 1980s where they could jump in between the pilot and the flight plan, right, and launch what's called a man-in-the-middle attack.
Right. I wonder how many times that's been done.
Exactly.
David,
so
it's
again,
shocking.
Strip. This is my advice to Americans, my good friends, you, is strip Serco, the Senior Executive Service, and Conair out of any contracts with the United States of America, and do it now. So it's a lot of stuff to handle, right?
Yeah, it is. Again, I never really heard of SES until everybody started talking about it on the internet, and you guys were right out front there, of course.
Yeah, we were the first really to expose it. I mean, everyone within that circle would have known about it, but the point is, it's very difficult, and it takes practice, and I guess I have a little bit of that, to pick up the threads of a bureaucracy and see how they connect it and how they control.
Right.
But when I saw, and I think I only saw that about 4 or 5 days ago, when I saw the particular welcome, it's so obsequious. I mean, I don't know if you Googled it, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and Senior Executive Service, about how to give them a soft landing when they arrived and give them an office with with the flag in it. I'm saying this is disgusting. If I'm a military guy in the United States, Navy, Air Force, whatever, I'm not going to salute the bloody bureaucrats.
Right.
Why would I do that? Yeah, a man can't serve two masters, right?
So it's interesting to think about people who knew about it and defended it. How could they not know?
Well, again, a bureaucracy, essentially, everyone is inside the box. You have inputs and outputs, and it's a process. And actually, to a certain extent, it's the same in the military, right? You have a chain of command. That's why Field is so powerful, because he's a rogue elephant, if that's the right word, trampling around. He's outside the box. In a sense, you've now been put outside the box, because there are people going around saying what you are and what you're not, right?
Yes.
And if you look at that kinetic patent, that can only exist because Serco approved that patent.
That's the social engineering thing?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's a pretty intimidating name, isn't it? Social engineering for whom?
Right.
Like cui bono.
Right.
And I think the work that we did, one day we may be able to prove it, has so alarmed Serco and the senior executive service, they felt compelled to put in a decoy. And if you look at these major events, like, you remember there was a fire in the Trump Tower?
Yep.
Well, you imagine a fire at Camp David or whatever it was when Bush's ranch, an arson attack. I mean,
would have been a huge deal. Maybe that's, yeah.
I think if you Google Trump Tower fire, it had about 2 days' worth of legs.
You're right. But do you think this was someone sending a message to Trump saying,
absolutely,
bomb Syria or we're going to kill you?
Yes. Because on 911, for example, they could have selected Trump Tower as a target.
Holy crap.
When you think about it.
It was a pretty big fire.
It is, and apparently it's got the characteristics of UHTA, ultra-high temperature accelerant. It's like a fireball. And then there's the attack on the Marine Corps headquarters. Again, I think that was a message, because about 3 weeks ago there was a letter sent to the Marine Corps headquarters commandant, I forget his name, and it was opened, and about 11 people, civilian and Marine Corps, in the vicinity of that letter got nosebleeds. So they sent her away to the lab, the FBI-tainted lab, which ever since Robert Hansen has been worse than useless, right? And they say it came back and it didn't test positive for any sort of chemical agent. But damn it, the purpose of it was to say, all right, well, we're going to mix this powder next time with anthrax, which is what was done after 9/11. And anthrax has a bacteria, or bacillus, or whatever it is, I'm not sure the terminology, is very heavy. So you need to mix it with what's known as sabotage spore powder to get it to disperse into the atmosphere, where it can kill people through inhalation anthrax. A very unpleasant way of dying.
Wow.
So I might be a Marine, I might be the bravest Marine in the world in a foxhole when the enemy's coming at me with guns and grenades and all the rest of it, but I'm not so confident when I know that the internal chain of command has been compromised and someone could put some anthrax and sabotage spore powder in the HVAC system in the building.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be scary, wouldn't it?
Yeah. See, that's what I mean. I think Trump attacking Syria is like, dark side wins.
I think he's scared to death.
Right. They're controlling
Remember
him.
that fire in the apartment inside Trump Tower? It could have been just like the Twin Towers.
Right.
Killed everyone.
Right.
And then you have this blackmail. We just talk about the pedophilia. You can look at what's his name? Buck Revell. Oliver, I think it is. Buck Revell. 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 And he was 25 years with the FBI. in counterintelligence and counterterrorism and all the rest of it. He left around 1994. He started a company called Imagis, Imagis Technologies in Vancouver, up here in British Columbia. And that does face recognition software to track pedophiles or suspected pedophiles or other criminal groups through the internet. Oliver Buck Revell. And do you know who they're working with?
Tell me.
Circa. Tracking pedophiles online. So they're walking these people into traps, then blackmailing them.
Huh.
And they're working with the National Crime Squad in the United Kingdom.
So is the FBI just, I mean, is everybody in there, what the hell's going on with the FBI, David?
Well, excellent question. Again, what I look at from an organization point of view, how well protected are these guys from what are known in the trade as man-in-the-middle attacks, right? So the Department of Defense, apparently a lot of people spend their time downloading pornography.
Right, I remember that. Hey, David,
Right.
what about, I mean, I'm going to take us on another hour-long conversation, but I think you and I need to talk someday about Pan Am Flight 103.
Right. Oh, incidentally, yes. So Oliver Buck Revell took his son and daughter-in-law off the tarmac before they got on Pan Am 103, so they didn't
Really?
get unibombed.
Really? Yeah.
That's
People knew
foreknowledge,
that was
right?
going to go. Yes, people knew that was going to go. Weren't there 8 Army intelligence guys on there who had information about Iran-Contra?
Possibly. But this sends a very good message. So controlling whether or not a plane reaches its final destination and having access to the passenger manifest, and then sending a message through crashing the plane, where no one's been punished. Again, you can only hide that with these very sophisticated online devices, including the social engineering ship, where you basically you troll around the internet to see who's got the truth. You try and shut them down or intimidate them or ridicule them.
That's exactly what's happening to me.
Exactly. So what we offer, I think, each other is once you understand how to trawl around the internet looking for patterns that are relevant to the crime. So I'd never heard of Novichok until it became public in in the Salisbury thing.
Right.
So I Googled Novichok and patent, and lo and behold, I find that Northwestern University patent for a detoxification system.
Right.
And then I see that was funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, so I go there and I check the Senior Executive Service, and I find out the DTRA is controlled by the Senior Executive Service, and they're given or granted the privileges of an office with a gold-rimmed flag for the Senior Executive Service. And I say, well, who are they saluting? Is it the uphold the Constitution against enemies, domestic or foreign, or the Senior Executive Service, which is an unhinged bureaucracy that I think has been made party through entrapment and extortion and blackmail to the idea of running an insurrection to overthrow the government.
What do the 13 stars surrounding the thing symbolize?
13 colonies.
Huh.
Prior to independence.
And they think they're the keystone of everything.
Yeah. So I think the structures that are in place, the informal secret societies in place, are the key, they believe is the keystone. And I think we've discussed it. There are 2 Greek life societies that were founded in 1776, right? Yeah. One is Phi Beta Kappa, which is the most prestigious one, honor society. The other is Kappa Beta Phi. Phi Beta Kappa has 17 presidents, 38 Supreme Court judges, and over 120 Nobel Prize winners. Phi Beta Kappa includes Bill Clinton and George H. Bush. Right? Kappa Beta Phi is the billionaires on Wall Street that used to have a similar footprint. Well, these clowns, they do cross-dressing slag off homosexuals and women and anything else that they deem to be a peasant. Some of them are billionaires. I think Bezos is one. But Mr. Trump's Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, is a Kappa Beta Phi.
Michael Bloomberg is as well.
Right. So when David Rockefeller said the world is ready to move to a supranational government of world bankers and an intellectual elite, the world bankers are Kappa Beta Phi, or the links to the world bankers are Kappa Beta Phi, and the intellectual elite is Phi Beta Kappa. So, for example, in the Presidential Emergency Operating Center on 911, you've got Dick Cheney sandwiched between a couple of pretty rough-looking women, right? Condoleezza Rice and Lynn Cheney, and they're both Phi Beta Kappa. Right? Bush is a pilot. He's kept out of the United States, well, out of Washington. He would have seen that that maneuver was a remote-controlled maneuver and might have been able to stop it. But they parked him in an elementary school. Condoleezza Rice told him not to come back to Washington. You were just on the edge of a coup d'etat.
Wow. I mean, but you think how could he have stopped it? George W., you're talking about? He's like the dumbest guy ever.
You know, this is dangerous, and I'm very, very reluctant to say anyone is dumb, because apparently George Bush was a well-considered pilot, a natural leader, and he could fly A-model aircraft, which are the more dodgy and dangerous ones. He's a very good card player, poker player, and his staff loved him.
George W.
Because you go down to the ranch, and he would serve you with a barbecue. He was very attentive to people who needed time off for their family, whereas Hillary Clinton is a patronizing bitch. If Bush had been in Washington, 911 wouldn't have happened. If he'd been anywhere near the radar screens that were being injected with false signals, or he'd been involved in any aspect of the war game of 911, the live fire hijacking scenario, it wouldn't have happened. So they had to get him out of position.
Right.
And do you remember the move from Washington State to Chicago for Boeing?
Well, I thought that was done because of the merger with McDonnell Douglas.
No, that was way before. That was done in order to have a command center for the 911 attack in Chicago under the control of the Obamas and their cronies, including Bernardine Dawn and Bill Ayers.
Whoa.
And Valerie Jarrett.
Wow.
And you know the preferred supplier of command and control equipment to Boeing is Serco.
General Electric. Oh, Serco.
No, Serco. All of those aircraft were modified to fly through decoy and drone maneuvers, where they predict the time of impact to within a second, and they take bets on the time of death of the passengers and the crew. From the oldest gambling club in the world in London called White's Club, 1692, of which the Soames brothers are both members.
Right, Nicholas Soames. Who's the brother? Rupert Soames.
Rupert Soames. He's the chief executive officer of Serco. And Nicholas Soames was the Minister of Defense under the John Major government from 1994 to 1997. And he told Princess Diana that you've got to be careful because accidents can happen.
Ooh.
And it wasn't the landmines that she was threatening to expose, it was the pedophile entrapment network.
Wow.
Which reached deep into the United States. Look at Jeffrey Epstein and his Orgy Island.
What was going on with the fire over there?
Yeah, exactly. There's another example. You know, what is it, One Day News? All of the evidence there, it said something about the island burning to the ground. I mean, that's a weird phrase. How do you burn an island to the ground?
Yeah, I don't know.
Every tree, every building. Anything that was like that would obviously be an arson attack.
I mean, isn't it Little St. James? What's the name of that island?
Yeah, Little St. James, I think. Or Little St. John. Little St. James or Little St. John.
Little St. John.
And I was looking for, a satellite view of the fire. But you see, This is what these bloody people at Kinetic are doing. They're bleaching the internet and YouTubes and all the rest of it, anything that they deem to be criminal or malicious, but they're getting to choose what is criminal or malicious. So I presumably they've deemed you as a criminal or malicious.
Well, that's what George's brother is trying to do, or threatening to do. Massive fire reportedly seen on private island owned by billionaire and sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein. This is News Media Watchdog. See, I don't know where this, I mean, there's a photo of it. Photo of fire reportedly seen on Epstein's private island, but how do I know? That could be any island.
Yeah, and how extensive is it? And I think in the article you'll find burned down, which is the weirdest phrase.
Yeah.
Like, how much of the island are there now no trees or buildings on the island? If that were the case, it would have to be arson, wouldn't it?
You'd think. I just wonder if we're getting it from anywhere other than, rumor mill sites. Like, how do we know it's all 4chan and...
Oh, I'll tell you what, you can Google Serco and Hawk Hills, that's HAWKHILLS, Hawk Hills, and look, and News Inject. So Serco works with the United Kingdom Cabinet Office in putting on simulation training exercises, where they borrow the client's communication system and then inject news and media plays into it to test whether or not the client is properly prepared to respond to an attack. Well, just think what that means. You could set up a Sandy Hook or a Las Vegas event, ostensibly to test the ability of the local police to communicate with each other. And all you need to do is watch for an opportunity and you turn a simulated attack into a real one. And then all of the players, the crisis actors, they don't know whether they're in a simulation or the real thing.
You know, David, all the things you're telling me are making me think of something. Almost a year ago, when I first met George and started working with him, he reported this story to me that there was depleted uranium on a ship that just happened to be pulling into the port of Charleston in South Carolina. And then someone in the audience, who I later found out was the same someone who helped George with his legal case, called the Coast Guard. And now George's brother and Robert David Steele and Manuel Chavez, since that day, have been trying to construct a narrative that I called in a bomb threat to the port. And now George's brother is, making 4 or 5 videos a day. I saw he made one about you guys, but I didn't watch it. It showed, all his videos show up next to my videos because he's always talking about me. He's working the algorithm on YouTube to try to put all this threatening nonsense in my face. And from what you're telling me, they did a simulation to test the readiness of the Coast Guard and the port and everything. And now they're trying to either intimidate me or actually create fake evidence to try to bring charges against me and get me to stop reporting news.
Yeah, and I other than telling you what I think I know and sharing that to the public at large, everyone has to make up their own mind how best to defend themselves against that. Right? Now, we've been saying some pretty severe things, let's say, about Field's sister, who I believe is the most powerful woman in America, for 10 or 11 years, and she's never sued her brother for libel. But your reputation is your property, right? If you don't defend it, you lose it.
Well, I'm not going to sue this guy because that's what he wants, but defending it is what I'm trying to do. I mean, you're helping me figure out what these guys are doing it and how they're doing it. I mean, George and his brother obviously know each other. George came with the story. The brother and all of his friends are the ones who are pushing the nonsense story that I called in a bomb threat.
Right. So, you see, I believe the way to handle these people is always to flank them and outmaneuver. So, for example, I believe that we can, and we've been making that statement frequently, that Oliver Buck Revell, the former counter-terrorist, counterintelligence deputy head of the FBI, a very powerful position in 1994, is working with Serco and the National Crime Squad in the United Kingdom on tracking down pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with modern technology is you can Photoshop someone into a hotel scene. So let's say A goes to a hotel, and in that same room, the day before or the next room, there is B abusing a child.
Right.
Then so you've got them in the same place, but not the same room, and then you Photoshop one head into the other film, and suddenly you've got what looks like a person abusing a child.
Well, they got all kinds of techniques for manufacturing fake evidence or things that seem like evidence.
Then you threaten to send that to the spouse,
right,
or show it to the family or the local police.
Right.
And if that's shown, for example, in a prison system, the other prisoners are going to kill you.
Right. Or even put it on the internet. That's the thing. That doesn't even need to be real evidence. They just start a rumor and back it up with something like that.
And so that comes back to my point about stripping out Serco, which is the number one tracker of pedophiles or suspected pedophiles or imputed pedophiles, together with the Senior Executive Service, which is this unhinged bureaucracy, I call it, and the instrument that they use to transport prisoners, killers, psychopaths, pedophiles, to anywhere in the world, which is Con Air or the Department of Justice. And what I'm thinking is, how easy is that? It's incredibly easy. You just tell Serco, get the hell out, and then prosecute its directors in the United States. Senior Executive Service you just shut down. And then you go into, let's say, the Department of Defense, where you have maybe 50 Senior Executive Service bureaucrats right at the top, swanning around doing very little. Get rid of them all, maybe arrest some, waterboard a few, and then go down into the engine room where you have some really good people, do a quick interview, find out who understands the big picture, and promote them to FBI director.
Right.
And then take the 18 intelligence agencies. This is absurd. You can't have 18 intelligence agencies falling. I mean, which one is Trump supposed to believe? I believe there's only one, in principle, it needs to be cleaned out, intelligence agencies for overseas assignments, that if I was the president, I'd go for it. I'd say it's the Marine Corps intelligence activity. Because I think of Marines, they're pretty good folks on the whole. I mean, there'll be some psychopaths amongst them, but they'll be courageous and loyal, right? And then domestically...
but what is that? Is that the DIA? Marine Corps Intelligence? No, it's its own thing.
Look up MCIA, Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, and you can see a map, and they're global, and they're the people who supply, I believe, the security people in ambassadors of the United States around the world.
Uh-huh.
They're well trained, they're well capable, and they have international assignments, but I think their communication system has been compromised.
Communication system? What's their communication system?
Well, for example, you can look at the Navy Marine Corps intranet. Navy Marine Corps intranet, NMCI, and look who runs it.
Serco, I guess.
No, Hewlett-Packard.
Huh. So what does that mean?
Well, it means you've got a private company with shareholders, probably including the shareholders of Serco, who control the company that controls high security communications between the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Wow. Yeah. Why isn't that the government controlling that?
Exactly.
And you know, David, I don't know if you've ever listened to Quinn Michaels, but he talks all about this artificial intelligence controlled communication network called Tyler.
Well, you know what? I mean, I listen to probably, and you might think I'm arrogant. I'm a world authority on artificial intelligence because I actually built a working system in the 1980s, and I wrote a paper called An Analysis of Expert Thinking, David Hawkins, International Journal of Man-Machine Studies, and it was published, and I talked about the limitations of artificial intelligence, and we haven't moved forward one iota. In the 1980s at Schlumberger, there was a huge amount of publicity, Time magazine, about AI. People, they don't understand what natural intelligence is.
It's certainly lacking for the most part. You know what I wanted to ask you about Schlumberger, David? Isn't it just a big giant CIA thing?
No, it's a private company. But again, when you have those global custodians that manage big pension funds, the pension funds will invest in Schlumberger, right? Mm-hmm. But they'll take a 5% or 3%. But if you have the global custodians that manage the pension funds, they can add up all of those minority stakes, and suddenly they own 60% of it. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think the Serco is the cutting edge of the deep state. I think Serco coordinated and synchronized the 911 attack. It's the world's biggest air traffic controller. When was any Serco personnel called in to talk about what they knew of 911?
It's like a corporate labyrinth, their website. Trust, care, pride, innovation. It's like a little brainwash.
Yeah, but you see, Serco, Schlumberger is an okay company run by engineers and technicians. The danger is Serco. If you look at the website and you look at the clients that they have, they've basically got all of the intelligence agencies in the United States, all of the military people.
Right. I'm always very suspicious of these companies that service, deep state companies like Halliburton, KBR.
Yeah. Yeah, but Halliburton is much more tightly defined. I mean, what Serco did, it got, when it was RCA, it got the contract for operating the 4-minute early warning system in the United Kingdom, where basically 4-minute warnings, I presume, would go to the elite, and they get in their bunkers in the elite hotels, and the peasants would get fried. That was going to be the same in the United States. And there's always the threat of a nuclear weapon. But I think the nice thing that now that we have this level of trust, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking, inviting, and almost begging you to help transmit the message in whatever way you're comfortable with, through the alternative media, if you will, because in a paradoxical way, a friend of mine has, or I've described what Abel Danger is doing as a franchise for the truth. I think the truth is so much more powerful. Now that you've seen, or perhaps understood, or brainstormed to yourself what a social engineering protection appliance is, you're a lot better protected, right?
Yeah. No,
the ability to recognize how you can get marginalized by a robot.
Right.
And nothing personal. So you peer behind the robot, and then you find out the custodian of that technology is Kinetic, and the custodian of Kinetic's patents is Serco, and they're both British companies.
Yeah, I've been a robot.
Yeah, a crawler, or whatever you call it.
A crawler.
So it looks for semantic or non-semantic information, like Jason Goodman, bomb threat, or something like that. So the robot starts to recognize you as malicious or criminal.
Right. They're constantly filling up the internet with information about me that's false.
Correct. And the bad guys are getting bleached. The story of the Trump Tower has got legs for 2 days, but that's the President of the United States. It's his personal property. And what the message, I think, is, well, we've taken out that building and that condo, and there's one guy dead, but equally we could put it in the elevator shaft and kill a lot of you.
You've just thought, you brought something else to mind, David. This steamit.com, it's their permanent slander machine. They control who can post there and who can't. And when they put something there, it can't be easily deleted.
Yes.
And they put all this fake crap about me on there.
Yes.
And they downvote all my videos about Harmon Wilfred being in New Zealand and blowing the whistle on the CIA bank. Look, they've downvoted it so much you can't even see it. Well, who would do that? Even if you hate me, Harmon Wilfred hasn't seen his wife in 2.5 years.
Well, the important thing here, I think, is to understand it's nothing personal, right? There are automatic crawlers and robots and trolls or whatever it was that are computer driven, that are looking for keywords and then downgrading them or blocking them or interfering them, so that the myths bubble up to the surface and the public gets the myth.
See, we see who it is. It's Titus Frost, it's Steam White, and it's Boris in Taipei, who have downvoted this Harmon Wilford video. And the funny thing about Boris in Taipei is that all he's done is blogged a bunch of Defango videos. And these are the same guys that are trolling me all over the internet, control the Steemit network, and they put a bunch of slanderous statements about me. They suppress this video about the Five Eyes, ruining this dude's life, keeping him away from his kids, his wife.
Yeah.
Now only 46 people have seen it on here. And even though these other people like it, these three idiots have the ability to bring it so far down that it can't even be seen.
Right.
This is a rigged network, even if it's not a financial scam, which I have very good reason to believe that it is. It's a propaganda machine for their team.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, Jason, thank you for giving me time, and
thank you, David.
Well, let's roll.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. This has just been an amazingly informative call. I'll put it out right now.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Bye
Thank
now.
you, David. Take care.
Yeah.